Welcome to this quick series of videos. This is the first of 6 that will introduce you to the collaborative, proactive solution approach to difficult behavior by Dr. Ross Greene. We're going to have a look in this video at our introduction and at a first shift. I'm asking you, Dr. Greene is asking you to make in the way that you approach behavior that you see in your children. That's the CPS model, stands for Collaborative Proactive Solutions. So, in these 6 easy to watch videos, Dr. Greene will show us that we'll have to shift some of the ways we think about behavior and about what motivates behavior in our children for us to be able to respond in a way that helps children, that solves underlying problems rather than just responding to the behavior. So our first shift in this introductory video is from focusing on behavior towards seeing the unsolved problems that the behavior represents. Now, once you've watched these videos, you'll be very keen to have more than just this basic introduction, and you'll want to know practical examples and how you can apply this in your own life and in the life of your children. And I would love you to head over to livesinthevalleys.com, which is Dr. Greene's site where he shares generously a whole lot of information about the CBS model, but also find any of these books of Dr. Ross Greene's that will give you incredible practical tips. So, our starting point. We often talk about kids with different diagnoses, different labels. Dr. Ross Greene says that we can actually divide kids into 2 groups, the lucky and the unlucky kids. The lucky kids are the ones that express their frustration with small frustration responses. Maybe they cry, or they moan, or they use their words. Unlucky kids express the problems that they are facing and the frustration they feel about these problems with big frustration responses, tantrums, meltdowns, tears, and hitting. Now, I'm always talking to you about the strengths of the wonderfully wired brain, but I don't have to tell you that there are challenges that come with being neurodiverse. And you know that often our wonderfully wired children fall into this category of unlucky children because their frustration responses when they struggle are often really big frustration responses. And we need to help them to respond to these with wisdom. We need to help them so that they can unlock those amazing strengths by really addressing some of these things that often come out as behavioral problems. And that's why the CPS model is such a great tool for us as parents of wonderfully wired kids. So, the way we've always been taught to handle behavior, the way we were modeled handling behavior, is that we use power. Grown-ups, parents have power, right? And they should use their power to get a child to behave better. What motivates us is that we believe that all things are possible with sufficient effort, and that if the child in front of me isn't doing what is expected, then it's because they don't want to enough. If he chose to be calm, he would be calm. If he chose to respond with a small frustration response, like using his big boy words, he would do so and respond maturely. Because we see him sometimes respond appropriately, so we assume that he must always be able to respond, and he's just not trying hard enough. We get this message from schools too. Teachers tell us, your kid really isn't meeting the expectations and you need to somehow get him to meet those expectations. You need to be on top of him, right? Well, power says what we can do is we can offer a carrot, okay? Let's offer a promise of a big reward or enough sort of stickers to make our child suddenly able to behave in the way to meet these expectations. Or let's threaten a stick, some negative consequences that will also motivate him to do better. We think and we assume that good parents do whatever it takes to make the child behave in the way that meets their expectation. And we often feel that the only way for us to do that is by using power. But power can be punishment, like I said. Maybe we're separating children, excluding children, giving them timeouts. We also see that schools use this. We suspend, we restrain, we expel. And in a power model, the adult manages behavior without necessarily understanding what are the underlying problems that are causing the big frustration responses. Well, there are two problems with using power. And the first is that power isn't really control. It's only the illusion of control. It may manage, like managing a fever, the outcome, the behavior, but it's not actually controlling the child or even the actual problem that's being faced. The more control we shoot for, in fact, Dr. Greene explains, the less control we actually have. And the second problem is that power is the wrong medicine. And often it actually doesn't only not solve the problem, but it makes it worse. Dr. Greene produced a documentary that I'd love you to go and watch. It's called The Kids We Lose. And it's such a powerful look at kids that struggle with big frustration responses and how the way that schools and adults and juvenile detention facilities respond with power to try and solve these problems, but actually really just sends children down a life story with fewer options and with unlucky failure and possibly even a life of crime instead of solving these problems. There is an alternative, and that is to unlock the potential and the emotional and social thriving of wonderfully wired children, but it's not what we see in the system around us. So, but why do we even use power if power isn't working? Well, for parents, a power response really focuses on behavior and it ignores these lagging issues, but it makes us feel we're doing something. It makes us feel that we're actually kind of being good parents, right? We're often motivated by anxiety and worry for our children. We're desperate to do something. We know that the behavior that they are showing at the moment will not help them in the real world, will not give them the outcomes and the success we want for them to have. And so we sort of want to force them back into a box in which they might succeed. We may also compare, and we feel watched by other parents, and we watch other kids, and we think we don't understand why our 5-year-old isn't behaving appropriately, or our 8-year-old isn't able to sit still for as long as somebody else is. And so sometimes we want to just get them in line with their peers. And really all of it is motivated by fear. We see how this is not going to serve them out there in school, out there in the real world. And we think if we could just apply enough tough love, we can get them to toe the line enough for them to have a future that involves some success. But we need to reduce our reliance on power, Dr. Greene suggests, with a much more intentional goal, to shift away from focusing on behavior towards seeing the underlying unsolved problems that the behavior is a fever of, a symptom of. Right? We have some figuring out to do, he explains. We must look beyond the behavior, see it as a signal, as a way of communicating some expectation that isn't being met. And our job is to figure out what's getting in our child's way, so that we can help them manage life better, because we're addressing really what's getting in the child's way and not the frustration response that they have because of what's getting in their way. So, unmet expectations are, in the CPS model, unsolved problems, or even better, we call them problems waiting to be solved. Dr. Greene calls us to figure out responses to problems waiting to be solved proactively, that's not in the heat of the moment, and together with our child. And in the next video, we'll make another shift from thinking kids do well if they want to, towards really understanding and behaving like kids do well if they can.